Muy buenas tardes. Me voy a permitir hacer una breve reseña del currículum de la doctora Diane Berry, quien amablemente aceptó participar en este maravilloso congreso que estamos teniendo. La doctora Diane Berry es profesora de la Universidad de Carolina del Norte, Facultad de Enfermería en Chapel Hill. Es profesora investigadora en la línea especialmente enfocada a diabetes y obesidad. En sus diferentes proyectos de investigación ha tenido oportunidad de tener contacto directo con poblaciones latinas que en este caso viven en Estados Unidos, y el impacto que sus investigaciones han tenido ha sido muy efectivo. La doctora Diane Berry además tiene una relación de trabajo con nuestra universidad desde hace 6 años. Ha participado en otras actividades con varios profesores, entre los cuales me siento muy honrada de pertenecer, y eso nos complace mucho, de tal forma que hemos podido concretar en este año un proyecto que tenemos en conjunto con la doctora Diane, por lo cual les pido la recibamos con un fuerte aplauso y le damos la más cordial bienvenida.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I look forward to sharing with you today. And I have to make sure I can get my program to work here. I was going to share with you today, I've had a lovely relationship for the last 7 years with the colleagues here in Mexico. And when they asked me to come back to speak, I wanted to talk on a more global area in relation to obesity and diabetes through the eyes of 4 of my doctoral students who are global, and looking at the problems that they're facing as nurse leaders in their country. I particularly enjoyed colleagues' talk before us because it really brought to light a lot of problems that we're having and what a incredible global community we have become, and some suggestions for ways in which we can move that forward in terms of sharing in relation to global health policy, health research, as well as health practice. When we talk about overweight and obesity, you know, back in the 1970s, it was fairly rare. I noticed when I went to get my PhD, it was not a popular topic. However, it has increased dramatically and spread to both developing and developed countries throughout the world. And I think together we can work on ways in which we can streamline messaging and working with parents and family members. So, you know, the how did we get where we're at? You know, in relation to, I can speak to the United States. Back in the 60s and 70s, the government strongly reinforced corn subsidies, which led to a glut of corn products in our country. Hence, they had huge silos of corn products and nowhere to do, so they started developing high fructose corn syrup, which is in pretty much everything that we eat nowadays, particularly soft drinks, fast food, and things in that. The other how of where we got here is relation to moving from farms into factory farming for meat production, egg production, and milk production. With that came, you know, working with animals in very close proximity, therefore the addition of antibiotics and chemicals to prevent disease. And we noticed a change in young women in terms of a young woman would mature between 14 and 16 years old. Now you see young women looking like 12 years old at 8 years old, and many times related a lot to the chemicals and intake that they take. Some of those are the pieces in where right now, initially, the U.S. noticed a huge increase in the 60s and 70s. And then we started noticing different countries, as the esteemed colleague was mentioning, a lot of the Central Americas. In relation to that, taking culture and literacy level in areas such as China and Saudi Arabia, which we'll talk to about today. So China is really pretty much on a revolution of developing increased diabetes related to increased overweight and obesity. The sheer number of people in the country, 1.6 billion, pales the United States and Mexico. Hence, you're going to have a higher degree of people who are affected by disease. And also remember, culturally, this is a group of people that were many times farmers and now are moving into big cities such as Shanghai or Hong Kong, Beijing, and living in very difficult conditions with high pollution and moving more towards fast food. And of course, their diet is very heavy in processed carbohydrates and white rice. And that with a decreased physical activity. My student from Taiwan, she's studying weight stigma in relation to Asian Americans who have moved to the United States, and looking at the differences between people in Taiwan. In China, in 2015, 62 million people were obese, overweight. And in 2014, 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 11 girls in China were obese. The implications for future diabetes and cardiovascular disease are really take a time to make you pause. Also, the alarming future financial burden is only now starting to be realized, but I don't think it's fully realized in relation. They're trying to develop some state or country programs to relate that, but also remember too, in China, their BMI, they're considered overweight at around 27, at a lower BMI that the United States or Mexico or Saudi Arabia would have. And that puts at an increased risk earlier, and they also have a lot of central adiposity that relates to the carbohydrate intake. Clearly, a increased westernized diet, technology use, sedentary behavior, and decreased physical activity have led to this perfect storm in China. And they don't have a lot of endocrinologists or nurses who are certified diabetes educators. They don't have a solid diabetes program, which we'll notice a lot of the countries don't have a solid diabetes program, even the US. It's pretty hit and miss of what a patient will get at a primary care doctor's office versus an endocrinologist office. And that paucity is really raising havoc, because you have, usually half of the people who are diagnosed with diabetes. There's another half in terms of motion in all of these countries that have insulin resistance and prediabetes. And so China is trying to work on some more regimented programs. And she'll hope to go back to Taiwan and China at some point, although she's enjoying her time in the United States at this point. Saudi Arabia has also a very interesting history. A total of 68.3% of adults are overweight and obese now in Saudi Arabia, and a total of only 28% of children are overweight and 20.2% are obese. My colleague, or actually my soon-to-graduate PhD student, is probably one of the first nurse researchers in the country that asked women their perceptions of overweight and obesity in their children. She was supposed to, we powered her study out to about 140 questionnaires plus some interviews. And what was amazing about this study is that she basically ended up walking away with 240 because this is probably one of the first times in their lives that these women are asked what they thought about, health and their children and what they were doing. She also has done some qualitative interviews to look at the differences between overweight, obese, and severely obese children, but I had to kind of ask her to stop this summer when she was at increased risk for personal harm secondary to car bombings in the areas that she was going to. So as her dissertation chair, I said, I think your time is over. Come back to the States and let's do your data and work through that. But she published a wonderful article, reviewed the literature in Journal of Transcultural Nursing this past summer with me, looking at the growth of the obesity and diabetes epidemic in Saudi Arabia. This is also related, quite frankly, to an increase in westernized diet, technology, sedentary behavior, and physical activity. As you're starting to see this thread, go through each country. Also, Saudi Arabia is, they actually, which I was very surprised as I moved into some global research, terms themselves a developing country. However, with the great vast wealth that has overtaken the country in the last 20 years, there's an excellent report that was done by a consultant that I had sent to them, talking about the increase in disposable income, the increase in sedentary behavior, technology use, and fast food use. Now, as we go through here, Saudi Arabia is one of the interesting countries. The United States and Mexico, we usually say higher rates of overweight and obesity in our low-income families. However, in Saudi Arabia, it's just the opposite. And Oman, we have another student in Oman. So the higher income families have the higher rates of overweight and obesity in their children, and they're working towards that. So Sama should be able to go back and help establish, which we're hoping will be a countrywide program through her university and the Ministry of Health, who's very interested in the research. This is actually an interesting picture. The largest free-forming surgical centers in Saudi Arabia are now pediatric bariatric surgery. So this is a young man who, probably about 15 years old, that's going to be undergoing or he underwent gastric bypass surgery. This is such a problem. There aren't many of my students that are from Saudi that don't know of an adolescent that's already had bariatric surgery in that country. And so as we move on in working, a lot of the pediatricians, are having a very difficult time. So Sama's going to be taking back my weight management intervention and translating it into Arabic and testing it. And we're trying to reach children that are just past breastfeeding. So really the target will be the mother who provides and helps most of the food. Of interest too in Saudi Arabia, because of the increased disposable income, they're basically able to afford house helpers and maids more so. So this is a common piece where many are South Asian Indian women who come in and help with the cooking. So there's a move away from traditional diet. One of the things we need to work with them is a move back towards their traditional diet and decreasing sugar beverages. So simple messages, limiting fast food and eating healthy foods raised in the area. As we move into the U.S., we have a long history of overweight and obesity in our society, looking towards, children many times will eat out 2 to 3 times a week, eating fast foods. They'll go to McDonald's, Burger King, Kentucky Fried Chicken. I finished Family Partners for Health study, which was an 8-site randomized clinical trial where we partnered a 7 to 10-year-old child and their parent together in low-income schools throughout rural North Carolina. And what we found was, a large intake. These women would work, and their husbands would work many times 10-hour days, and their children would go to school. They would get a subsidized lunch that was high carbohydrate, high fat, and high sugar, as well as a subsidized breakfast. They usually went to after school. Sweets were used as treats and to congratulate them on student academic performance. So I've worked with the state of North Carolina for the Alliance for Health and working towards a bill that will decrease or end utilizing food that's denatured in that manner in the school system. And also in the U.S., which was quite surprising, is a lot of our physical activity teachers or gym teachers will sell chips, soda, and candy bars out of their desks to make money for the teens. So we've worked with them to end that as well. And so really the key is the family. You have to work with the family, and you have to get as many family members involved. And many of our families in the U.S., and I'm not sure about Mexico, but about 50% of our parents were divorced and were single parent families. And then they would share custody, and the child would go into a new food environment in the weekend. So that really, took a lot of work, ever involving grandparents and grandmothers. And so another area that I'm working on right now is working with pregnant women. We just were funded by NICHD, and we're conducting a 10-site randomized clinical trial with women with type 2 diabetes and following them and their offspring through 10 years using a registry in relation to looking at any fetal abnormalities. We'll do cord blood as well as placental biopsies, and that's through the MFM network and throughout the U.S., which is a lot of OBGYN doctors. Also helping the women eat healthier and stay within their glycemic controls. Many of these children with a mother born to a mother with type 2 diabetes, they are conceived when the mother has high glycemic or lack of glycemic control, which if you are interested in doing some further reading, looking at fetal programming or epigenetics, at the point of conception, these children, basically, their lot is died for life. There's an increased risk for overweight, obesity, and type 2 diabetes later in life. I went and did some library work in the fall. Actually, it was the fall and the spring because we had two lovely students visit us from Mexico, Beatrice and Eduardo, who helped do the library search as part of our student exchange program. And we looked back into the Helsinki trials where women during wartime and lack of food basically and then followed their offspring for many, many years after and found their offspring had a higher incidence of cardiovascular disease. So some very interesting things, and we really are paddling in water that we have no idea in relation to the overweight obesity epidemic. But most important, the type 2 diabetes. We know that if a child is diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, their mean age of death is 11 years old. We have no clue of these children that are insulin resistant, develop type 2 diabetes. And many, many years ago when I did my postdoc at Yale, I worked with Sonia Caprio and her team in the clinics, and it was, quite surprising how young adolescents, sometimes we had children 400, 425 pounds at age 11, or a mother would bring a child in because they were having difficulty walking and they were 1 year old and 100 pounds. So there's a lot of unknowns to work towards. In the U.S., we continue to have problems, although we get leaps in the data that say things are improving, but we just keep working on all levels, and I think that's key in relation to working on an individual, a family level, a community, a state level, and national level. And I would implore people to start working more on a global level. Mexico clearly, has also many, many children in relation to 69.9% of adults are overweight or obese, and 22% of children are overweight, and about 20% of children are obese. Just backing up to the United States, our biggest group, we have almost, with our African American population, about 80% of the women are overweight and obese. So that's a huge target area for us. As I've worked over the years with Lydia and her esteemed research group, and have read more, looking at the northern border of Mexico in relation to the United States, has some of the highest overweight, obesity, and type 2 diabetes rates. And once again, fast food, technology, and all of those pieces are brought in together. In addition to that, I think we need to continue. Looking at some data, I hope you can see this. It's pretty light. But looking at BMI results, and I'm more than welcome to share my with increase in obese in different countries. In addition to the WHO data in 2014, looked at the United States, and this was with children 15 to 19 years old. And as you go down through the data and look at the percentiles, some of the lowest countries are Switzerland and Japan and France. But we have a lot of work to do in the United States. Definitely, that's a big piece. So, looking at global diabetes, how, what, and where, we have very, very similar results in that area as well. Clearly, overweight and obesity drive a genetic predisposition for patients who, are of American Indian, Hispanic, Latino origin, African American as well. A Pima Indian in Arizona will be 30 pounds heavier than their cohort in South America. And, that's telling in the piece. When I was up at Yale, I did a consult for the Mashantucket Pequot tribe, probably one of the richest Indian tribes in the United States. They own Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut. I drove over there with Margaret Gray, who was my post-bac mentee at the time, and we met with the tribal leaders. When we walked into the room where there were 12 men, and most of them were between 400 and 450 pounds, very, very heavy. They had a state-of-the-art exercise center. Each of their citizens received a baseline salary per year because the casino was put on reservation property. And I think one of my questions is, and they also had a McDonald's in the after-school program. And, that paper was published in Journal of Cultural Diversity, the focus groups we did with parents. And I think the key thing is, we had to ask them, well, what's going to make you want to change? Well, they wanted to change because of their children. They saw themselves, they saw the risk. There was a high risk of renal disease, amputation. Many Indian reservations throughout the United States have dialysis units right on the reservation because the diabetes rates are so high. And that really foretells, a very, very difficult life for their children. And there's one of my colleagues down in Alabama does stratification and genetic sequencing for levels of Hispanic groups in relation to risk and things. Jose Fernandez, if you're interested in looking at that piece. Looking the IDF, which is another great resource, as well as a resource our colleagues shared, from WHO, You know, basically by 2035, there's expected to be 592 million people with diabetes, a 55% increase. And this is just going to kind of keep moving forward. Also, the proportion of deaths. As you can see, the highest proportion of deaths are in Africa at this point. 38% in North America, South America, 44%. And a lot of this is it's a new disease and there's not systems in place. And so that's one thing that we need to reinforce, and I'm reinforcing my colleagues' previous talk, and that we have to make this a global issue that we can work with through and through. And so talking a little bit about global health policy, I don't think we have enough hours in the day that we could do that. But, you know, some things, looking at the International Obesity Society, clearly the World Health Organization is a leader in moving this forward. You know, I think we need to look at nutrient profiling, looking at how nutrients affect different cultures through different times. Some cultures are more sensitive to carbohydrates than others. Some are able to handle it better. We could, in one of our studies, we could have an African American male that was 30 to 40 pounds heavier than than a white male, and that child had less insulin resistance, you know, time and time again than the white male. And I think, you know, if we look back at history and pieces of that, and why people, you know, aren't, you know, going through and trying to stick more to a traditional diet. One important thing that I would suggest that we need to look at is monitoring and marketing of foods and beverages to children. This is imperative. Back in the 1960s and 70s, I'm very familiar and very comfortable driving around New York City. You would see billboards really focused on African Americans and marketing towards cigarettes and alcohol. You know, Colt 47, you know, cigarettes and pieces, and you see that out a lot near the Indian reservations where smoking and alcohol intake is really high. Now we see insidious, you know, marketing towards our children on TV commercials, sugared cereals, and there's not consistent rules. You know, so your child or your grandchild, you know, sees Lucky Stars, you know, on TV and they want it. Or they think of the, you know, the small meal, you know, at McDonald's, because they're going to get a toy in the box. So I would, you know, implore working at state and national levels and global levels, because we have strength in all of us, you know, in relation to how, in some countries it's easier to work through, you know, such as Norway and Denmark, smaller countries, you know. When you look at Mexico and the United States, you have big countries, you know, and a lot to work through. So that's one area that we're working at in North Carolina, is how things are marketed and, you know, working with parents. Clearly simple messages have been very effective in terms of increasing water, decreasing sugared beverages, and really empowering parents, since they're in charge of the food dollar, you know, to take care of making decisions when they go to the grocery store. Also evaluating food environments. We live in, you know, I can speak to the United States, but we have areas in the United States that we have what we call food deserts. And so many of you have probably already heard about that, so I won't bore you going into it directly, but they have some interesting studies where they're doing GPS tracking of food markets and where they are to people's houses. I can speak to when I was in Inner City, New Haven, at Yale, you know, sometimes our patients had to take 2 buses to get to a decent food market, and there weren't a lot of farmers markets in the inner city. Whereas if they walked to the corner store, wow, it looked good. A banana was 50 cents, but you could get 3 honey buns for $1. You know, or soda and things of that sort. So looking at, you know, how we're marketing, we've done some innovative things in North Carolina where in many of the hospitals we're having farmer market on Wednesday, so all employees and patients can, you know, stop down in the main lobby and the farmers bring their produce in. We also have food produce buses that go around to different areas that don't have access. And we also teach parents on a more micro level, you know, how to shop farmers markets with food subsidized coupons. We always also tell them to go at the last hour of the market because the farmers don't want to take that whole box of peppers home, you know, so they can actually stretch their food budget quite a bit. The other thing, you know, need to look forward, move a little bit towards would be global health research. And I think this tags on to colleagues' discussion earlier, is we need to set up large data sets linking overweight, obesity, and diabetes data. The WHO does that great, but you know, we can do it better in terms of electronic medical systems. We are increasing clearly day by day in the US electronic medical systems, which not only helps us as providers. I can go, when I'm seeing a patient in the emergency department, I can go right online, and if that hospital is a part of the Epic system, I can pull their chart up, and, which is really helpful, you know, and also moving towards that. But the WHO is an expert in terms of, you know, working through large data sets and oversight. The other piece is global health practice, and, you know, looking at how we can work together in relation to overweight and obesity and diabetes. Many problems happen right in the healthcare provider's office because they're shy about starting the conversation. And I think the conversation has to start earlier with more parent involvement in relation to food choices, and then at a community level, and a state level, and national level. Your university system here is set up very close to ours in North Carolina, where we have 16 universities across the state. So we have options of working together with universities in the mountains, in Asheville, or by the shore, and then nationally and globally from there. But, you know, sharing information, you know, on state programs we've set up that might be useful in your area, like Eat Smart, Move More. You know, working with schools, thinking of innovative ideas where you can bring parents and children together at the end of the day. You know, they can have homework help, they can get a healthy meal, they can learn a little bit about nutrition and food. So I think it's all areas we need to work on, not just one area. And then clearly thinking globally how we can work with each other across global boundaries. And that would be it. Thank you very much.
Es el momento de preguntas y respuestas, por lo tanto le voy a rogar a la doctora Sue Lachenmeyer to come over here, this questions and answers, y también a nuestro invitadísimo, el doctor Pedro Croco, por favor, y las personas que les han acompañado.
Bueno, como no se lanza nadie, pues uno de los ponentes de mañana se lanza. Lo primero, me gustaría agradecer a todos los ponentes por las fantásticas exposiciones, pero tengo un par de preguntas que me han quedado ahí, especialmente para el doctor Croco. Me ha parecido muy interesante en todos los casos, todas las presentaciones, pero creo que especialmente en el caso de Pedro, me ha parecido muy interesante el poder comparar cuál es la situación de Latinoamérica con el caso de Europa y especialmente de España, y ver en qué situación estamos nosotros. He podido comprobar que a lo largo de toda la intervención hemos hablado en varias ocasiones de un término que nosotros en España y concretamente en Europa, la Comisión Europea, a nivel de salud está trabajando mucho en estos momentos, y es el tema de la evaluación. La evaluación en resultados en salud y la implementación de esas prácticas a partir de la evaluación. Creo, Pedro, que has hablado de dos tipos de evaluación, una evaluación medible y otra una evaluación no tan medible pero del impacto. Nosotros estamos trabajando mucho con conceptos como Healthcare Improvement Science, etcétera, etcétera, todo lo que tiene que ver con mejoras en salud, y esa es una de las preguntas que te quería hacer. Y la otra de las preguntas en relación a tu intervención es sobre el papel de la enfermería desde la perspectiva de la OPS, porque has hablado mucho de medicina basada en la evidencia, y mi pregunta es ¿dónde queda la enfermería basada en la evidencia para la OPS y en especial el perfil de la enfermera para la OPS? Simplemente esas dos. Agradecer a todos los ponentes las magníficas exposiciones. Gracias.
Bueno, muchas gracias por la pregunta. Voy a contestar las dos, pero empezando por la última. La verdad es que es un defecto. Es tanto medicina como enfermería basada en evidencia. La verdad es que en general es como un defecto, digamos, personal, pero desde el punto de vista práctico, lo que estamos hablando es no solamente de enfermería ni medicina, estamos hablando fundamentalmente que todas las profesiones de la salud, digamos, tomen sus decisiones basadas en evidencia. Ese es el concepto real. En cuanto a la evaluación, comparto, sí, desde el punto de vista práctico, la tradición, yo diría, en América Latina es quien se evalúa poco, primero. Segundo, los dos conceptos están, pero una cosa es hacerlos carne, y ese es el gran problema que tenemos. La verdad es que la evaluación en América Latina es generalmente evaluación de procesos, por sobre todo de procesos, si es que la hay, es de procesos, pero poca de resultados de outcome. Eso es muy poco. Y tiene que ver con que en general lo que marca en América Latina una política es una vez que ésta obtiene presupuesto, y la verdad una vez que tiene presupuesto puede seguir por siempre y siempre y siempre. Y la verdad es que ese es probablemente uno de los grandes peros que tenemos. Pero no solamente América Latina, sino que generalmente el mundo. Y lo que pasa es que cuando uno genera un programa, genera un proyecto, un programa sobre todo, no tanto así un proyecto, un programa, va generando también intereses creados. La verdad, va generando grupos de poder. Y esos mismos grupos de poder muchas veces son muy resistentes, ¿no es cierto?, a algún cambio. De ahí la importancia, reconociendo esa realidad, de que la toma de decisiones sea fundamentalmente informada en evidencia. Porque la verdad, en ese escenario, que es el escenario concreto, el escenario de la política real, el escenario en que lo sucede en todos los países, sabiendo que una vez que se inicia un programa, es difícil cambiar un programa, a pesar de que uno insista en las evaluaciones, es importante que el programa a su inicio esté fundamentalmente informado en evidencia.
Sí, pero fantástico, y estoy totalmente de acuerdo con lo que comentas, Pedro. Yo aprovecho para abrir la brecha cuando hacía mi pregunta sobre la enfermería basada en la evidencia, porque uno de los problemas que tenemos los profesionales de enfermería del mundo hispanoparlante es precisamente que no trabajamos habitualmente con evidencias científicas. Y ese es un problema que tenemos en España y es un problema que se tiene en toda Latinoamérica, con lo cual ya de por sí ahí el decir que se debe trabajar con evidencias científicas ya de por sí es un problema. Y luego la segunda parte va enfocada al tema de las publicaciones, que me ha parecido muy interesante que tocases, porque hablamos de publicaciones con factor de impacto, publicaciones que hablen de evidencias, pero la realidad también es que además de que los enfermeros en el mundo hispanoparlante no se suele trabajar, voy a decirlo así, con evidencias científicas, normalmente solamente lo hacemos el mundo académico, el mundo de la gestión, de la investigación. Tampoco hacemos publicación con factor de impacto, porque no tenemos muchas publicaciones de enfermería con factor de impacto, con lo cual ya de por sí el tener unos objetivos donde se hable sobre evidencia científica ya de por sí son un hándicap, ¿no? Iba por ahí un poco mi pregunta. Igual que el hablar de la comunidad cuando en estos países de los que estamos hablando, en Latinoamérica, pero también en España, no tenemos una enfermería comunitaria auténtica y real, como por ejemplo tiene el Reino Unido, los países del norte de Europa, etcétera, etcétera.
No, en el tema, yo voy a tocar un tema que es bien importante y tiene que ver con las revistas. Cuando uno mira América Latina en general, hay 4 revistas, 2 en Brasil, una de la Organización Panamericana de la Salud y la otra la Instituto de Salud Pública de México, que en el fondo son revistas que tienen básicamente todas las calificaciones. Entonces, una de las grandes deudas que tiene la región es fundamentalmente, en el fondo en todos los ámbitos, voy a decir, el tener revistas indexadas, ¿no es cierto?, que tengan, ¿no es cierto?, de alguna forma acceso a los cuales tengan acceso los distintos investigadores de América Latina. Yo diría que es claramente uno de los grandes problemas que hay y es por eso que en general uno tiende a ver que incluso muchos investigadores de América Latina publican en revistas del hemisferio norte porque desde el punto de vista práctico la verdad es la única posibilidad real que tiene. Entonces uno de los esfuerzos que está tratando de hacer OPS es fundamentalmente fomentar a que claramente existan más revistas a las cuales tengan acceso y que tengan factor de impacto, que sean revistas indexadas, porque viene un tema en general en que en principio está América Latina al debe. Hay un tremendo debe. Y coincido con lo que tú planteas desde el punto de vista práctico en general, uno de los grandes déficits que tiene es que no se trabaja tanto en evidencia. Ahora, y la verdad es que un poco la historia de OBS a lo largo de los años es ir colocando los temas en la agenda pública, ir esperando que en el transcurso del tiempo esos temas vayan fructiferando y se vayan generando los cambios. La verdad, hace pocos años, yo diría, ni siquiera se hablaba de evidencia. Lo bueno es que ahora estamos hablando de evidencia. Y lo bueno es que en pocos años más probablemente vamos a ver que cada vez las decisiones son más basadas en evidencias y probablemente cada vez más va a haber incluso más lugares donde las personas puedan publicar. Y la verdad, eso significa que van a haber más revistas que tengan, ¿no es cierto?, indexadas en el ámbito de América Latina, que van a haber más revistas que tengan el idioma español también como una alternativa válida, porque todos esos son tremendos hándicaps en 2 sentidos. En el sentido, primero, de quién puede publicar y segundo, de quién puede leer. El tomador de decisiones tiene 2 grandes problemas. Uno, que no sabe dónde tener la información y a veces que no entiende la información porque la revista científica no está hecha para el tomador de decisiones. Entonces la otra gran brecha que tienes que resolver, y ahí viene todo el tema y todo el movimiento de los policy briefs, los documentos de política, como uno quiere llamarle, que justamente tratan de cerrar, ¿no es cierto?, esa brecha entre la investigación y el tomador de decisiones. Ese es el camino que uno ve, ese es el camino que se están dando, pero todavía tenemos claridad absoluta que todavía falta mucho por andar.
Pero ya corto aquí, el problema que yo, y ya les dejo que pregunten todos, el problema que yo veo, Pedro, es que estamos hablando en líneas generales, pero el problema es que las pocas revistas que publican con factor de impacto en Latinoamérica publican contenido médico. A mí como investigador me cuesta mucho que una revista como Salud Pública de México, y ojo, yo publico en Salud Pública de México, publique un artículo que tenga que ver con enfermería, porque son revistas que no reconocen palabras como automanejo, palabras que tienen que ver con enfermería habitualmente, con lo cual ya de por sí la enfermera no se la considera una tomadora de decisiones en el mundo latinoamericano. En el mundo europeo sí, y sí que existen más revistas, o en el mundo estadounidense también existen más revistas de enfermería, pero simplemente era matizar ese punto, es decir, nos hace falta que las enfermeras se empoderen también, igual que queremos empoderar al paciente, pero nos hace falta también apoyo como las organizaciones, en este caso de la OPS. Muchísimas gracias.
I was just going to add something onto that. Over the last 7 years, worked very closely with our colleagues here in Mexico. And I'm on the editorial board for Hispanic Healthcare International with Nina Pellegrado Mandado. And I would highly suggest maybe using a model that we've used is that we partner together, we create grants together, we write articles together, and then, you know, it's an equal process, so moving that forward is very helpful. And I'm sure there's a lot of mentors that, you know, colleagues of mine, you know, for example, our Family Partners for Health was published in Nature Publishing, Nutrition and Diabetes, which is a high-impact journal. And so I think as researchers and professors, and I'm a firm believer in evidence-based. It has to be evidence-based, but let's partner together and work together and elevate the science, which I think is a great way to move forward. We all are learning every day, so never be shy.
So I would like to encourage partnership with the American Public Health Association, the Society for Public Health Educators. There are both practice and research journals, and they are available both online and hard copy. And I know, for example, that SOPI, Society for Public Health Education, partners already with PAHO and other organizations, as is APHA. So there really are many opportunities and many published articles about the work done in various countries. So I do think that thinking more broadly about international opportunities is really a good way to go, particularly with online access. So I do encourage, you know, students and your professors to publish, because that's really the only way that we get the information out.
Muchas gracias. ¿Habrá alguna otra pregunta en el auditorio? Sí. Un micrófono aquí abajo, por favor.
Sí, muy buenas tardes. Primeramente felicitar a los ponentes, muy buen aprendizaje que nos han dejado el día de hoy. Y yo voy enfocado a lo que estaba comentando el representante de la Organización Panamericana de la Salud. Y yo creo que también cuenta mucho lo que nosotros tengamos que hacer por enfermería. Si bien las personas que se dedican a la investigación y que publican son más por el lado de la docencia, los que están en universidades. Y entonces, ¿qué pasa con las demás personas o compañeros que están en el sector salud? Lo que falta es que nos reconozcan la investigación en los hospitales para que podamos ser mayor comunidad, que podamos estar publicando, aportando a la carrera, ¿verdad? Y de esta manera darnos más valor como carrera y que vayamos creciendo en enfermería y que nos vayamos cimentando más como lo que somos, ¿verdad? Para que seamos un poco más reconocidos y que vayamos creciendo como profesión.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias por la pregunta. Yo comparto plenamente. Yo creo que el tremendo desafío que se tiene es justamente el poder compartir las experiencias, y cuando se comparten es cuando se publican. Voy a plantearlo tan así. Porque en la medida que yo, en el fondo, una experiencia fundamentalmente de hacer un programa, de implementar un programa, en la medida que no está escrita en algún lugar y está asequible desde el punto de vista práctico a cualquier lugar del mundo, quiere decir que la experiencia no es conocida por el resto. Y en la medida que no es conocida por el resto, la verdad es que pueden cometer los mismos errores que ustedes cometieron, o peor aún, ¿no es cierto?, de perder oportunidades de hacer las cosas mejor. Entonces ese yo diría que es el gran desafío que tiene cualquier profesional de la salud que se forma. La verdad es que justamente tiene dos funciones. Una función que tiene que ver con atender de la mejor manera a sus pacientes, y lo otro también actuar en el bien común y compartir las experiencias con el resto de la comunidad internacional o nacional. Porque lo que parece trágico es que muchas veces se hacen programas, se hacen experiencias que funcionan bien en algún lugar, y en otro lugar distante se está inventando la rueda totalmente de nuevo. Y lo peor aún es que a veces en algunos lugares se hicieron experiencias que resultaron mal, y de otro lado están replicando las mismas experiencias que resultaron bien. Entonces yo diría que lo que la universidad forma, y quiero destacar, son personas que tienen que tener la competencia, del punto de vista práctico, de hacer ambas cosas. Y esa segunda cosa es importante, la investigación operacional es importantísima. La verdad, uno de los grandes problemas que tenemos en América Latina es que generalmente somos muy buenos diseñadores de programas, peores implementadores y mucho peores evaluadores. La verdad es que, y eso es un tema en que todos ustedes juegan un rol importante. Y la universidad, el que forma o la persona que forma, sea mujer o hombre, tiene que tener esas competencias. Esa es diría que, lo fundamental de la universidad. ¿Ah? Y eso, la verdad, lo ideal es que no lo pierdan, porque desde el punto de vista práctico eso es lo más rico que les enseña la universidad. A cuestionar todo, y desde el punto de vista práctico también, ¿no es cierto?, poder probablemente compartir esa experiencia con otros. Muchas
gracias. I think that's very important, and also investing in our colleagues, closer? Okay. Investing in our colleagues' scholarly development. At all points in our life, we've been novices, and then we become experts through our experience. And I think it's very nice. I've been working with Lydia and other faculty members over the fall semester, and we've put together a lovely grant writing institute, which we're going to work and co-teach next week. We have 10 faculty scholars who will be joining the 5 professores, and I will be there to back up, answer questions, share grants, and really 5 days of working together. This is investment in the community of scholars. This provides a baseline of what we're looking for in terms of standardized evidence-based research. How do we design a study? How do we, develop a problem? How do we set up specific aims, research strategy, and all of those pieces. And at that point, then I will be there as a mentor, but the faculty who we've worked with Skypes this fall will take over the program, and will then continue to train and work with their faculty. We'll work from afar by Skype and sending emails back and forth. So this is one way that we can invest in the scholarly activity to move things forward. And then from that, comes the articles, comes the publications, comes the presentations. And so it's been a wonderful honor for me to continue to work with my colleagues here in Mexico.
So I do want to suggest that the United States is really going through an overhaul of their healthcare system. And it is a hotbed of learning and opportunities in terms of quality assurance measures and really changing the approach of medicine to require the linking to community organizations, the linking to measurable outcomes that have to do with the quality of life, not only clinical outcomes. And we're doing a great deal of work. In particular in Maryland, we've really, again, our hospitals are required, they are single payer, capitated rate, population health mandated. First state in the country, which is really an experimental opportunity, but making the entire health system responsible for the health of everyone, whether they walk into the door of the hospital or walk into the door of the clinic. So tremendous opportunities to share across countries and organizations, as well as opportunities for students and learning.
Muchas gracias. Agradecemos cumplidamente las preguntas del auditorio a nuestros distinguidos ponentes. llamamos la presencia de la doctora Carolina Gutiérrez, secretaria técnica de la facultad, para que haga entrega de un reconocimiento a la doctora Diane Berry y a la doctora Lidia Compeán por su participación en esta conferencia. Muchas gracias, doctora Gutiérrez. Muchas gracias a nuestros ponentes y las personas que moderaron sus mesas de trabajo. Muchas gracias a todos ustedes. Muchas gracias por su asistencia. Buenas tardes, buen provecho y nos veremos mañana. En punto de las 9 reanudaremos nuestro programa académico. Muchas gracias. Hasta mañana. Hasta mañana.